Thank you everyone for joining us on this event that is hosted by the Global Transport and Logistics Research Group here at RMIT. My name is Professor Victor Gekara, and I'm the director of that team. Now, the topic that we are discussing today is gender equality in the transport and logistics sector, and how embedded ideologies impact the labor market in relation to gender participation, and particularly female participation. But before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and Bunwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded land we conduct the business of the university and this particular event. RMIT University respectfully acknowledges the ancestors and elders, past and present, and RMIT also acknowledges the traditional custodians, their ancestors and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia where we conduct our business. All right, so there is absolutely no doubt in my mind as to the importance of the topic we are discussing here today. And indeed, the number of participants registered for this event is great testimony to that effect. We have over 100 participants drawn from industry, academia, and the government, including international participants from as far as and wide as Kenya, New Zealand, and Bangladesh, including some members of the United Nations. Thank you all for joining us. Some of us, through research over the years, have tried to understand why, over so many decades of change in the nature and structure of work, the technologies of work, national policies, and indeed significant efforts from industry organizations across all sectors, a large part of the labor market, not just transport and logistics, still remains predominantly male-dominated. So some of the questions that we attempt to grapple with, include: is this because of failures at the individual level, so in the individual people themselves, workers themselves, or is it indeed due to failures at the organizational level? Is there something that the sector and the individual organizations are not doing that is perpetuating this state of affairs? Or indeed, is it as a result of historically embedded structural and cultural social attitudes that is perpetuating this situation? These are some of the questions that occupy the work of researchers. And over the past 1 year, Dr. Ada Galebiji and her team have devoted a significant amount of time developing research, building industry partnerships, and collecting data in order to contribute to our knowledge in this topic, with specific reference to the transport and logistics sector in Australia. Over and above the many interviews that they have collected, which will in time be analyzed and disseminated widely in the form of academic and industry publications, they have established valuable industry contacts and relationships with people that are deeply concerned and greatly interested in this topic. We are keen to see that these relationships continue to shape what will definitely become an important and extensive research program for the Global Transport and Logistics Research Group here at RMIT. Some of these people involved in the research are indeed part of the audience here today, and I extend my deep gratitude for your continued support. So it is the preliminary findings from this research that Ada is presenting here today as a way of provoking debate, broader debate, and we are very lucky to have two highly experienced industry practitioners join us and provide us their views, experiences, and observations as part of that bigger debate, which I am sure we'll continue to have. The presenters today include Dr. Ada Galebiji from RMIT University. We have Ms. Lois Wynne from the National Association for Women in Operations, and Ms. Julia Armstrong from AP Moller Maersk. I will introduce them in turn to present for a few minutes. Then we will open the session to Q&A. And please feel free to type in your questions on the chat box as they come to you, but we shall discuss them and we shall engage with them when the formal presentations are finished. So then, first up is Dr. Ada Galebiji, who is my colleague here at the School of Accounting, Information Systems and Supply Chain. And Ada is an academic and program manager in the school. She has a PhD and a master's degree in supply chain management. She coordinates and teaches courses in supply chain management and logistics in undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Ada's research is focused on supply chain management and she has extensive experience undertaking industry-related research with great impact. Ada is passionate about gender equality, and in her research, she investigates the impacts of ideologies on gender equality in the workplaces in the transport and logistics industry. I am very proud to introduce to you Ada to present her findings. Over to you, Ada.
Hello, thanks very much, Victor. And hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I'm so excited and delighted to be here on behalf of the research team to present the finding of our recent research on the topic of the impact of gender equality in the impact of embedded ideology on the gender equality in the transport and logistics industry in Australia. I'd like to start by showing some numbers to you. So the left graph and the yellow line indicate the percentage of female participants in the ABS classification of transport, warehousing, and postal over the last 20 years. As we can see, it's steady rate over just above 20% female percentage, which means that we've got about 80% male workforce in the sector. The blue line in the right graph, it shows the total number of employment in the sector, which we can see the sector has been successful in attracting more workforce, but the gender balance hasn't changed, and we are still having that 20%, 20-80 segmentation. So despite the fact that, as Victor mentioned, it's the expectation of having more advanced technology used in this sector, there was that belief that it's going to be in favor of women and we are going to attract more women in this industry, but the number doesn't show this. We still have the same steady rate over the last 20 years. So what happened in our research team, we thought, let's find out the sources of inequalities. So we wanted to find out how the executives think about the sources of inequality in this sector. So that's why we conducted in-depth interviews with the executives, general managers, and managers in the sector, asking them about the sources of inequalities in the workplace, its reasons, and how to address them. Why executives? Because their ideologies of sources of inequalities shape the pathways toward change. How they see the issue and where the roots of the issue sits in provides the solution and strategies to changing those problems. In studying the gender equality in workplace, we can come up with three main ideologies. The first one is the individualistic. That's where men and women, we believe that they're fundamentally different, and the sources of inequalities are coming from the individual men and or women. The second view is the societal view, where there is a belief that boys and girls are socialized differently in the society, and the way that they have been grown up and becomes at the time that they become part of the workforce, their personality and characteristics has been shaped, and there is nothing that the organization can do about it. Then the third ideology is about organizations and the organizational view. That's where we believe in that men and women are treated differently by the organization, and the sources of inequalities rooted in the organizational processes. Each of these views and ideologies give us a pathway toward change. So let's see how we go with each of these views. So with the individualistic view, the source is in the individual women and or men as the source of inequalities in the workplace. Therefore, number one inequality comes as women unwillingness. That's where I've heard about, people and leaders in the interviews told me that not many women are interested in coming into operations, or telling, is it them or is it the females that are not applying? So we can't necessarily blame the organizations for that. So these two quotes show that, the people who talk about this, they see the women unwillingness as the main source of inequality, and it comes from the individuals, and we need to change women if we want to have them more in this sector. Or some of the leaders think about the women and kind of blaming them in terms of saying that that's their lack of confidence, that they are not applying for the jobs, they are not putting their hands up because of the lack of confidence, or telling that it's I've even heard one of the leaders told me that if women are paid less, that is because they are not negotiating enough. So instead of seeing it as a systematical issue and a systematical problem, it's seeing it as a women issue, that they don't have the negotiation skills. Still seeing it for women that they are not capable of doing some of the jobs in the sector, or telling me that logistics is interesting because there is some jobs that are just physically difficult for women. So bringing that benevolent sexism in place by just wanted protect women by not giving them some certain jobs because they think either they are not capable of doing it or it's not suitable for them. It's not always about women. It's when we think and see as an individualistic lens, we see men as the sources of inequalities as well, and that's where their unconscious bias may come in into the decisions and affect the women in the workplaces. So when we've got executives thinking about the individualistically and thinking that individual women or men are the source of inequality, then their solution comes as in to let's change the individuals, or let's equip those individuals. Therefore, mentorship programs, training, and networking comes as the number one solution to the mind of these executives. Yeah, they are good programs, but there are some issues with them because the emphasis is on the individuals. If the anticipated results not achieved, then they backfire. If we send women to the mentorship program and they go there with this mindful that I'm gonna take this opportunity, and therefore after that I'm gonna apply for my promotion, or I'm gonna get to that job, or I'm gonna receive that respect that I'm deserve to receive it, but because of the structural or cultural barriers or systematic issues, it's not coming in, then that female workforce, they think that either it's them having some problems and they think that I'm not good enough for those jobs, or they get frustrated of doing everyday battle of proving themselves that I am as good as others in this job. Ultimately, women leave the organization, and the impact on the workforce when we've got the individualistic view is not going to be that positive impact that we think that by changing the individuals we can get there. Then we've got the societal view, and that's where the executives think that that's the societies as the source of the inequalities, and that's where the social expectations, domestic responsibilities, the stereotypes, boys clubs, all of those things come and play in place. So it's about telling me because of the domestic responsibilities that women have, usually they are less flexible at the workplace. Obviously, this person sees the domestic responsibilities, that social concept of it as an issue that impact women, which is right and okay. but where is the organization role? Or when we say it as a bigger picture by saying, but I think it's bigger than employment. It's about the societal norms, about why is it that more women don't drive trucks. So seeing it as the big stereotype, yes, it is happening, and we do have those stereotypes that impact women's career. But where is the role of organization in that? By seeing the source in the society, can we go next, please? By seeing the source in the society, it means that we are unloading the responsibility to society. Those executives who have the societal view, the solution that comes to their mind is to challenge the stereotype, to change the status quo, and unload the responsibility from organization to society, because the organization cannot change the society. So, ultimately, it's not going to impact the workforce, the current workforce in the organization in terms of gender inequality. Then the third view, the third ideology is the organizational view. And that's where the organizational processes, procedures, and cultures are the source of inequality. And that's where the management knows themselves as responsible, that their decisions are going to impact women. And this quote from one of the interviews mentioning that management need to have a clear understanding of what their workplace stands for and how their actions affect women. And then continue, women are still going to get exhausted at some point if they have to continue a battle against the unconscious bias or the bad culture or the respect of their teammates, referring to the structural and cultural barriers to the organization and knowing that organization is responsible for that. So the leaders who have this view, the solution that comes to their mind is, let's break the barriers systematically by embedding the right culture based on the right processes and procedures. That's where the organization recognizes itself as the main change agent, and they act accordingly to remove these structural and cultural barriers within the organization. And this is, when we do this, that's when the impact is going to happen for women career, and we can change and reach the gender equality in the organization. Can we go next, please? This is just an example of each of these lenses when we think about one of the factors, how we can deal with them by having those lenses on. So unconscious bias, it's coming as one of the biggest challenges that women face, the unconscious bias of men in the organization. And it happens through the access and entry, the entry point through the recruitment, through the job assignments in the organizations, and then the promotion and all the processes. Female workforce feel it and see it and deal with this. If we've got the executives having the individualistic view and individualistic lens on, they see the issue of the unconscious bias sourced in the individual men. And that's where they think that men should try not to be biased. Or even I've heard sometimes, some told me that men are men, we can change them, but let's equip women to deal with that behavior based on the unconscious bias. So the change efforts limited to the training programs in the organization, and it's not going to impact the women's career that much. Then if we've got the executives thinking in the societal view, they think that it's the broader society and we should teach boys, not to be biased. And how to do that? It's with the schools, it's with the families, it's with the, the society-wide awareness. What happens is either the organization do nothing, or if they want to be active in this space, then they go to schools, they do some awareness programs within the school, they try to change the perception of the people for this industry to get more boys or girls knowledgeable about this. Is it going to impact the current workforce in the organization? No. So then it comes to the organizational view. That's where the organizational processes are the sources of inequality. And then the executives and the leaders believe that the organization is responsible for mitigating the bias. And that's why they start changing the hiring and promotion processes. If we go to next, please. And then how we can systematically remove the unconscious bias. So equal pay can be the first action, because when we pay less to women, we are sending the fake signal to men that you are valued more because you are paid more. So it adds to the unconscious bias in the main in male managers when they are recruiting. You know, they get this signal that men are more valuable than women in the workforce. Or when we got men tending to recruit more men, we need to make sure that you know, we are removing that unconscious bias that impacted the decision of the senior managers by having a diverse interview panel. So changing the processes by asking to provide a recruitment justification, how the impact, you know, how they think, why a female or a young lady is rejected. They need to provide some justification. You know, was that because of the skills or was that because of the unconscious bias? By having these processes in place, we may see, you know, changes that, you know, removing systematically that unconscious bias. So I'm going to conclude my talk here. We are facing a vicious cycle in the sector, a vicious cycle where a male-dominated workplace is regenerating itself and perpetuating the perception of a female hostile environment in the sector. We need to break this. How? We need to have more organizational lens on, more organizational ideologies embedded into the mind of the executives and leaders. In our interviews, we found that most of the leaders, they see it as the individualistic or societal view rather than the organizational view. So they either were focusing on changing individuals or changing the society. But we need to have more focus on the organization and the organizational processes. Let's change the conversation from this job is not suitable for women to how I can make it more suitable for women. I'm done, I'm finished. Thanks very much for listening. Over to you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Aida, for those insightful, for that insightful presentation. Thank you very much. And to the audience, those are broad findings from the study, and I'm hoping that they are going to encourage a lot of discussion. So please get your questions coming on the chat box, and we shall discuss them after. So the next guest that I'm going to invite is Miss Louise Wynn, and she's passionate about people and focused on innovative workplace changes for high performance. And Louise brings 26 years of operational human resources and change management experience in manufacturing and global business to support individuals and organizations in creating truly inclusive workplaces. In our role as the CEO of the not-for-profit association NAWO, that is the National Association of Women in Operations, Louise leads a network of individuals and organizations who support and activate better gender balance in operations. Louise advocates for change that will strengthen the pipeline of female talent, remove systemic barriers to female success in order to achieve more diverse teams at all levels. NAWO's membership is drawn from a broad range of operational industries such as manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, utilities, agriculture, resource, transportation, transport and construction, property management, and professional services. Over to you, Louise, and the floor is yours. Thanks.
So, yes, wonderful. Thank you for welcoming me. And Ada, thanks for such a fabulous presentation today, because it's a really important discussion and it's a really great way of articulating the difference between systemic change and that sort of individualistic or societal view of what needs to change. And so it's a fantastic structure for the conversation today. NAWO is an organisation of many companies and individuals who are all keen to see one thing happen in the future, and that is to see gender diversity valued and balanced at every level in operations. We're keen to see this because we know that it makes a huge difference to the workplace, not only through increased productivity and profitability, but also through workplace culture and creating an environment where people can thrive no matter what their background. And we know that when we have a more gender balanced workplace, that we often also have a more diverse workplace overall. And that's really important in a country like ours, which has amazing diversity to draw upon. At NAWO, we focus on three things. Firstly, we do support women in their career in operations. So women who are currently in career, we like to consider ourselves a big supporter of theirs, a big cheerleader, because we know that it is difficult to navigate some of the systems that are currently in play. And so we do put extra support around women in the NAWO network to make sure that they thrive in their career, no matter what they're deciding to do in their career. But obviously we want to see women take on bigger jobs with higher levels of responsibility through to P&L responsibility in operations. The second thing we do is focus on inclusive leadership. So we know that women will leave a workplace if they do not feel supported by their direct line manager, and in order to feel supported by your direct line manager, that line manager needs to understand how to be an inclusive leader. So we're focusing on that area a lot. And the other thing we do is bring member companies together in the NAWO network to learn and share from one another, so that we're not all solving these systemic problems in isolation. So we do have a real systemic focus at NAWO, and that really supports Ada's findings, and we're certainly passionate about breaking that cycle that Ada showed on her final slide. In terms of transport and logistics and my views on what needs to happen in this particular sector, I guess I'm informed from a number of sources. So firstly, transport, warehousing and postal sector members in our network is the first area that I'm drawing knowledge from. Secondly, I've looked at the data available on the sector beyond just general representation, and so I'd like to just talk about that a little bit. And thirdly, I'd like to talk a little bit about NAWO's 9 levers and how I think that can inform the kind of systemic change that needs to occur to attract, retain and promote more women in the sector. When you look at the data, it's really interesting to see that we obviously see we've got that 20% representation of women in the sector, but when you drill down a little bit further into that, you see that 62% are in admin and clerical jobs. Now, 23.5% are in key management positions, which are considered the feeder positions to general manager and CEO positions in Australia. And that kind of information is really important, because what we can then see is that you're really drilling down into where the jobs are being done and by who. So to continue on that stream, sales in the sector 56%, professionals in the sector 29% representation of women. And interestingly, I need to look at the definition of this further, but 66% of community and personal service roles in the sector are done by women. So it's a pretty traditional picture. Some other statistics that I'll touch on too when I talk about levers. When we look at some of the issues for women generally, one of them is obviously the gender pay gap, and that's driven by multiple factors. It's driven by where people are in doing those jobs. So the fact that we've got 62% of people in clerical and admin roles in the sector will be driving a component of that gender pay gap. But there are definitely other biases that play into the gender pay gap equation. And when we look at what's been happening in transport, we've seen that 45% of organisations in the WGEA data have done a gender pay gap audit, and 47% of those who have done an audit have taken action to close the gap. So I think that gives you a little bit of a sense of where the level of activity is at as well from a systemic change perspective. And I'll talk about a couple of the other key stats too when I'm talking more specifically about the levers. When I talk to people in transport industry in our membership, and I recently had the great pleasure of being part of a panel at Limfox actually, where they were celebrating their women for International Women's Day. And I think there's a really clear view that there are some perception issues in terms of what this industry is, what the jobs are, and what kind of careers are available. And I think there's a absolutely huge opportunity to change that, to role model people in the industry who are a bit different and who are perhaps doing things in a different way. So they might be men or women, but certainly role modelling and holding up progressive leaders who are operating in a different model in the industry, as well as highlighting all of the different kind of people who are in very exciting jobs in the sector. I think there's a huge opportunity there that could change the game. I think there's also the feedback that I get is that there's still a real view that to go into this sector, you need to have had experience in this sector. And so I think there's also a systemic opportunity here to really rethink that and stretch our minds a little bit to talk more about capability rather than experience and how many years you've been in a sector in order for you to be able to do particular jobs. Now that's a big ask of people because historically we've always looked for the same kind of people for the same kind of jobs, and I, having worked in HR and manufacturing for my entire career, know how well the job description gets rolled out from 1999 and it's still being used for a particular job, and that drives the job ad and that drives the recruitment process. I think some organisations are really shaking that up and really having a good old think about actually what really are the criteria for this job, what are we really going to market for, and making sure that they strip back those massive lists of criteria that we have grown accustomed to seeing in operational sort of role descriptions, and then of course transferring that into job ads. So I think challenge yourselves to think a bit differently about the experience versus capability matrix would be another key observation. Some fundamentals, and I think Ada did a great job of sort of reflecting on some of these in her presentation as well, but there are some absolute basic fundamentals that before you start attracting more women or more people of diversity of any kind into your workplace, there are a few things you just need to get done well, and that is a respectful workplace culture every day. So having values that are actively lived to and people are held accountable to. Physical amenities that enable people to get changed, to have their lunch, to access uniforms that are physically appropriate for them. All of those basics need to be in place. A focus on not allowing a situation where people become the only in a group I think is really important. So being very cognizant of that if you do face that situation. So if you are bringing in your very first woman into a department at any level, that you are cognizant of it and recognise that being different in any kind of group of people is hard work and it needs a little bit of extra support. Flexibility obviously is absolutely key for women, and progressively it will become absolutely key for talented men as well. We're seeing a huge shift in the attitudes of young men towards their parenting responsibilities, and this will require us to continue to take the positives out of COVID and the positive flexibility out of COVID and make sure that it stays in the industry as well. And effective management of parental leave is tied to that, of course. So there's some fundamental things that absolutely I think you have to have right, and you have to have a good, hard, long look at before you start thinking about really getting out there and trying to attract more people of diversity, including women, into your workplaces. So with all of that, I feel like I'm running out of time, but I'm just going to check the chat, see if anyone's yelling at me. It'll come up in a second. But the NAWO 9 levers that we've developed, I'll just give them a plug just to finish my section up. And now that chat's actually loaded, I'll have a go at adding in a link there. The NAWO 9 levers are designed to give our member organisations a bit of a roadmap as to all of the systemic components of their world that need some attention in order to better attract, retain and develop women. And oh, we are out of time. Okay, we're over time. Okay, I'm seeing the chat now. It's taking a long time to load. I'm so sorry. I will send around a copy of the 9 levers so that you can see what we've got in the way of a roadmap to help with this, but I hope that's been helpful.
Thank you very much, Louise, for that insightful presentation, and I'm sure that there's a lot in there that the audience and ourselves can take away and develop greater discussion, and I'm sure there are going to be questions that will be directed in your direction. Now, the next guest that I'm pleased to invite is Ms. Julia Armstrong. Julia is the Oceania CX Executive Manager at AP Moller Maersk. Her passion for all aspects of international trade finds her with 20 years of industry experience, an expert within the field of international trade, indirect tax and trade consultancy. A large portion of our career has been spent in offshore oil and gas industry, writing project bylaws for some of the largest oil and gas projects in Australia. She currently forms part of the Australian Border Force Compliance and Advisory Group, co-designing solutions for trade and compliance issues. Strategically working with government regarding trade modernization, exploring the vision of a future trading environment within Australia. In addition, she has established an industry working group presenting to Australian Trusted Trade Policy Team suggested strategic benefit for service providers. She has a deep passion for creating an environment where teams can thrive and also be challenged. Her passion of leadership has inspired her to further peruse her studies, undertaking a Master's of Leadership. Over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Victor, for the introduction, and thank you for everyone joining today. And Ada, thanks very much for sharing your research. I really look forward to discussing these important topics and exploring this further with you. Look, I really do share the same sentiment as Ada and Louise. I have a deep passion for creating a fair, diverse and an equitable environment within our industry. Today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about my experience in industry and what I've encountered. So my career within the logistics industry started approximately 20 years ago. After taking a break from my current studies, like many others in the industry, I planned to work for about 6 to 12 months and then return back to my studies. Well, here we are today, and it's a little bit longer than that planned 6 or 12-month period. Looking back, when I entered the industry about 20 years ago, and I started at an entry-level position, but I also reviewed and jumped at different opportunities as they were presented to me. I was always curious and always was open to new experiences and opportunities. Over a very short period of time, I quickly fell in love with this industry, and as an added bonus, I was having an absolute blast. Look, during those very early years, my friendship groups were still at uni, and for a few of them that were working, they were working in office jobs in town. But my job was a little bit different to the typical office job. Most days I was spent at the port or down at the wharf, climbing on board vessels with customs, clearing international crew, inspecting enormous mining equipment and a whole range of other tasks. It was all spent outside the office, and you know, what's there not to love when you're young and free? So I continued that role for about 12 to 18 months, and then I was offered an opportunity that really ripped up the handbrake and took my outdoor work adventures to a grinding halt. Look, I thoroughly enjoyed my new role and having an opportunity to explore and expand my depth of knowledge within the industry. It was just the beginning of a wonderful career within the international logistics world. Look, upon reflection, there's not a lot that's changed within our industry. The fundamental foundation of our industry is, sadly, almost status quo. But naturally, a number of processes have converted to a digital environment. But what did stand out for me in my early years, while there also did appear to be an equal representation of gender from a holistic view, is that gender role stereotyping was prevalent. Women held mainly administrative type roles, and there was a very, very clear underrepresentation of women, if any at all, in management and senior exec positions. Look, I grew up in a very non-traditional, stereotypical family. So the evaporation and non-presence of women in management positions was somewhat confusing to me. While I didn't find this position confronting, what I did see was an amazing opportunity to drive change in an industry that was predominantly male, and in many business units, all male, but mostly in the management positions. I felt in order to drive and influence change, I wanted and needed to be a part of those management positions. I needed to have a seat at that table to encourage and influence other women to join in the management realms. So it was back to the books I went. I studied part-time for approximately 4 years, and I eventually became a licensed customs broker. I was first appointed to my first management position when I was only 3/4 of the way through my studies. Being appointed to a management position in this industry and not yet having completed your studies was unheard of. I was a young woman with only a handful of years of experience under my belt. However, I have always had an enormous sense of drive, passion, and a desire to bring equality and create opportunity. The team that my new management position had been established for a long time, and they had many years of experience between them. My appointment, to say the least, shook things up a little bit. And a few of the long-term senior staff members were not impressed. So as a result, 2 of the senior brokers decided that the new structure was not for them, and they resigned. Look, I was okay with that. And again, I was presented with an opportunity to recruit talent and invest in within our existing talent within the team. And most importantly, we needed to move forward and create this diverse business unit where gender was equal. Look, gender is only one element of diversity, but it's a critical one. So one of the first things that we did is we introduced a formal mentoring program within the business and supported and encouraged members in our team to really stretch themselves and think big about where they wanted to go and that they could achieve almost anything. Through the mentoring program, I saw an opportunity to develop leadership skills, tackle tough subjects like negotiations and pay rises and promotions, drive networking opportunities through industry associations, and we also had upskilling programs and a range of other initiatives tailored towards individuals. Through that particular mentoring program, one of the female team members decided that she wanted to return to study. And eventually, a few years down the track, she became the head of finance, which is an incredible achievement. And I wonder if that could have happened without this initial program. However, unfortunately, success stories like this don't often transpire unless the organisation has an awareness of gender, the disparity that exists, and they are willing to invest and support to achieve equality through all levels of the business. An awareness and investment, the business needs to focus on establishing an environment that discovers, develops, and supports current and future female leaders. It's imperative. Look, in my experience, and I can confidently speak to the last 8 years, creating high performance teams requires a diverse team, including gender, race, age, cultivating diversity of thought where different voices and opinions are challenged, respected, and as a result, greater innovation of processes and solutions are presented. Not only that, from my side, it's so incredibly rewarding and satisfying to create an environment where all team members can thrive. Look, during my career in management, I've also spent a lot of time in boardrooms, and, you know, more often than not, I'm the only female. You know, this still baffles me today in 2021 that this environment still exists. You know, I'd love to hear from the audience about how you feel about this and what's your experience in the boardroom environment. Look, I'm an expert in my field, and when sitting in the boardroom environment talking about my field of expertise, I do naturally command a level of attention from the audience. However, at times, I do notice a slight shift when the conversation moves to another area outside my field. In order for my voice to be heard, I project my voice and become more assertive with my body language in order to gain that same level of attention. Look, granted, we've come a long way in the last 20 years or so, but we are still a very, very long way from achieving true gender diversity and equality, as we can see in Ada's research. It's not happening quick enough, and the numbers presented today in the boardroom are not enough to have a true financial, innovative, significant impact on our industry. Look, as we know, having a diverse representation at the table forces assumptions to be challenged and greater consideration to different perspectives. From my perspective, these conversations have been taking place in industry for many years. Far too long, in my opinion. It's time to draw a line in the sand and make necessary changes to reap the rewards of true gender parity. We also need critical mass to move the needle. At least 20% representation of females at exec level. You know, and I don't know, is quota or target setting the solution in order for us to gain momentum? Again, our audience, I'd love to hear your thoughts around quota and targets being set for our industry. In my previous role, we started to explore within Asia Pacific region the gender ratio representation. Again, looking at it from a holistic view, there was gender parity, a 50-50 representation throughout our Asia Pacific region. When reviewing the data and we moved up the ranks of the organisation across the Asia Pacific, there was prominent a dilution of female representation. Look, we presented the data at the exec regional team, and the task was set for us to explore what strategies we could pilot with the idea of implementing to support female development within the senior exec representation across, to avoid that shift in mid-career drop-off. There were two key areas, firstly, that we decided to review immediately. Firstly, as Ada suggested, we looked at the recruitment practices, keeping gender diversity at the front and mind of every recruitment assignment, with the aim to become more gender diverse and inclusive across the organisation, wanting to fill our talent pipelines with a greater gender balance. We also wanted to remove potential unconscious gender bias practices by both the hiring manager and potential candidates, each of the recruitment assignments. So, for example, what we wanted to do is we wanted to remove names and ages from resumes. It was a simple one. However, by setting the expectation for all hiring managers to review the position, requirements, skill, and align the job to fulfill based on that criteria. The other thing we also looked at is job sharing from a part-time option. And the idea behind this was to naturally help them to create and diversify more from each of the positions that were vacant. Furthermore, when potential candidates reviewed the job ads, we wanted to use less masculine words and include references to diversity and inclusion that would also improve our image, and that we were serious about this, that it meant something to us, and encourage more females to apply for vacant positions. Lastly, we wanted to have gatekeepers to challenge the recruitment practices and change the hiring manager's common approach to evaluating candidates based on their skills, years of experience, and choosing candidates that fit the historical like-for-like mould. Secondly, we also looked at who was available within our own organisation, and we wanted to commit affirmative action towards making sure female representation is at least 20% across all business levels. Also, to be competitive, we also needed to review the parental leave policies and being more flexible with the return to work career paths. Also, these are our aspirations and we needed them to be possible to achieve. We also wanted to remain engaged and connected with our staff that were on mat leave, as we'd received some feedback that some current return to work mat leave felt that they were so disconnected when they came back to the business. So we set up a plan where we actively encouraged engagement throughout the whole entire cycle of the mat leave, such as group chats, team group chats on WhatsApp. They were also encouraged to attend all the team building events that would happen, attend monthly department meetings, and also industry events where they could network. Also, they were paid. So whatever attendance they wanted to come to, such as in the team environment, they were paid. So that was really, they were really encouraged to participate and continue to be part of that growth. Look, women should be and feel supported by the organisation, workplace policies, and engage in an organisation through our understanding and also having a flexi career choice. This will result in a wider talent pool and in turn, greater diverse offerings at the entry level for senior positions. In essence, creating a large enough net into the talent pool, not only limiting our ability to recruit the most talented individuals due to a biased recruitment process. Look, there can be some holes in this process as well, which is something that we all need to be aware of. The risk is once recruited, not enough flexibility or opportunity is provided to grow available talent. It could result in that talent leaving. Look, our industry is currently experiencing transformational change, and this creates opportunity and skill sets not traditionally represented in our industry. So we want to attract and harness the best possible talent to support and scope out the future of international trade and the domestic environment. In order to attract and maintain that level of talent, we need a fundamental shift. A recent study by PwC cited that 83% of women seek careers with businesses who demonstrate strong records of diversity and equality. We can't afford to miss this opportunity. Look, most recently, I decided to embrace another career opportunity and was presented an opportunity to work for an organisation that fundamentally valued gender diversity and diversity of thought at all levels. Working for an organisation that values diversity was a baseline feature in my organisation selection criteria. The organisation also has an existing gender diversity policy worldwide, and this has been in place for many years. However, I will also say that having a policy in place does not automatically grant gender equality representation. What it does do, it supports and provides strategies to draw upon to continue the momentum to strive towards a balanced objective. And it also includes pay parity. My current organisation is well aware there is still some work to do, but they are genuinely committed to make change and stand by their policy and values. Thank you for your time today. It has been an absolute pleasure to share with you my experiences throughout my career, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Feel free to share your questions in the chat box, and Victor, I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thanks for that presentation. It's very insightful and thought-provoking. Unfortunately, we seem to have gone over time quite significantly, but however, let me beg for your patience and just pose a couple of questions that have been posted online. The first question is directed at Ida, and it's coming from Razon Chandra, and it is, how do you feel we can increase the number of female participants in the T&L sector in developing countries?
Thanks very much, Victor, and thanks for the question. That's a really good question. I'm thinking there is no difference between developing and developed countries, and it should start from the organizations. So if we wanted to see the change happens and to increase the gender balance, we need to start looking at the organization, the processes and the procedures in place, instead of focusing on the how to make the society change or how to empower more women to be more confident to come in. So still the same thing. Go through the organizational processes, look for it, look for all those impacts that the processes and procedures put on the culture and the structure of the organization.
Thanks, Ida. Thank you very much. The next question is directed at Louisa, and the question is, what are some of the major obstacles that NAWO encounters in their efforts to achieve gender equality in the workplace?
So it's a very big question, but thank you very much. There are so many barriers to women in traditionally male-dominated workplaces, but we're getting there slowly but surely by addressing the systemic change that needs to happen. So to Ada's findings, the more we can move away from thinking that women need to be fixed and women need to be more confident and women need to do things differently, and move to the model that both Julia and Ada have spoken to, which is what systems do we need to change and fix to make sure that women are heard? What systems do we need to fix to make sure that women can participate to their full value? And I certainly also I'm really positive about NAWO member companies who all join NAWO with a clear vision to be working on all of these systemic things. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much, Louise. One final question, please bear with me, and thank you for your patience. One final question to Julia, a very quick one for you. I know it's a big question, but please just give it a quick response. One of the areas of the labour market that is often forgotten from the debates like this is the seafaring sector. What improvements have you observed now that you are associated with Maersk, a shipping company?
I'm sorry to say that I'm not in a position at the moment to give some feedback about the seafaring. I'm well aware of the seafaring sector. I haven't ventured into it yet. But it is coming up over the next 6 months, and I cannot wait to dive in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia. All right, look, I'll not hold you any further. I really appreciate your joining us on this event. I can assure you that it is the first of many events that are going to come out of this stream of research within the Global Transport and Logistics Research Group. I will let you go now, and then please encourage you to stay in touch with us, Ida, myself, or Shiva, and whatever questions that you might have in the future, we are happy to respond to them as we go along. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in future events like this. Thank you.